Alright, hello and welcome to another video, and the first one of the Mercenaries League. So this is the week 1 sort of character update. A little bit late on this one, I'm sorry about that. Just sort of didn't feel ready to make it beforehand, but now I feel a bit more prepared. Hopefully I can give you a good overview here. But yeah, I've been playing, I've really been enjoying it, and I'm currently 98. I should really get 100 by now, but I've been trying some wacky stuff. But yeah, well, I'm playing a Champion Armor Stacker, so that's pretty cool. If you're familiar with the channel and maybe haven't followed for a while, you might remember that I did Armor Stacker back in Total League, which was that was a while ago now, but it feels like a while ago. Maybe it was only like 2 years or something. But yeah, I did play Armour Stacker a lot back then, and that was very fun. I've not played it since, so I figured it'd be a good idea to go back to it and have some fun with it, because obviously it is an archetype I really enjoy. So I figured I'd try it as a champion, because champion has had some updates to its ascendancy, which make it pretty juicy. You can see that this node right here gives you just max fortification instead of having a set number, and then this one gives you more armor and evasion and attack speed per fortification, about 20. So you get a bunch of rewards for stacking fortification, and obviously more armor and evasion is very powerful, because armor stackers stack these two stats, and these nodes are very powerful. And then obviously you get the aura effect from inspirational as per usual, so that is obviously very strong as well. So that just seemed fun. I'm not doing champion because I think it's the de facto strongest or anything like that. I do think it's very good, but it's definitely up in the air with champion and Scion right now for whatever is best for armor stacker. I believe, take this with a grain of salt, because I haven't fully POB'd endgame setups of this, like multi-mirror investment setups of these characters just yet. Give me like a few days or something like that, and I'll have probably a better view of this. But my hunch is that champion might get a bit more damage versus Scion, which gets a bit more ES, which sort of makes champion a little bit better early on, and Scion probably a little bit better at really multi-mirror investment, because once you get into the really high investment portions of these characters, you get so much damage, like billions of damage, where the extra damage you get from being a champion doesn't really matter anymore. Everything just dies anyway, so you'd rather have the more ES at that point from Scion. So that's sort of the way I see it, but I think both are going to be very good throughout this entire spectrum anyway, and I want to try a champion, so that is why I chose it. So it's not some sort of, I think it's objectively better or anything. I just want to try it. It's new, and it sounded fun. So that is mainly the reason for that. So why don't we go through sort of the basic mechanics of armor stacking if you were not familiar. So this will be a quick little overview here, quick in quotations. So you see that, of course, armor stacking, the idea is that you stack a bunch of armor. You can see on this character right now, if I press my grace button, I have 2 million armor. So that is that is quite a lot of armor. And that gives you a bunch of Fismet, which is good. And it also gives you a bunch of damage. This might not seem super intuitive, but like all sort of stacking builds in PoE that are really good, stacking the thing you're stacking gives you sort of all avenues of the character, gives you both defense and offense. That is what makes stacking that one thing so good. So the way we're scaling damage with armor is we're using this weapon right here. This is the Replica Dreaming Feather. It gives you 1% increased attack damage per 450 armor right at the end there. So of course, when you have like 2 million armor, you can imagine this gives you a ton of percent damage. It basically just solves all your percent damage needs and even more. So this is a really nice source of scaling. You can even use 2 of these if you so wish to double up on it, which is very powerful. And then we are scaling flat through different auras. So armor stackers are sort of what happened to the old school style PoE aura stackers. It's sort of the same shell, but armor stackers these days kind of just get a bit more out of it than what aura stackers used to. So you are scaling auras. We are taking clusters with introspection jewels with a reservation. So these sort of small clusters. Mine are all really bad right now, but it is the same idea. So you have those and have a bunch of those. I'm going to have more eventually, but again, this is sort of an early setup of this character. So you use that in order to scale aura effects in order to get really juicy auras. That gives us flat damage via both the Wrath aura and then more importantly Smite. So there's a separate Smite setup for this character just for the buff. You put that in your March of the Legion boosts if you're using them, which give you a bunch of gem levels just natively. And Smite, if you're not familiar, has an aura component to it. So when you hit something with Smite, you get an aura that gives you a bunch of flat added lightning damage, and this importantly scales with aura effects. So since we have a bunch of aura effects, this becomes a very powerful source of flat damage, and then that flat damage gets scaled by the Dream Feathers percent, and that all gets scaled by our armor. So that is sort of how our armor influences our damage, and it's very powerful. As for how we are getting this insane 2 million armor number, it's multiple reasons. Since, as I mentioned, we are aura stacking, the main way you are getting this much armor is actually unintuitively scaling Grace. Grace is an aura that gives you evasion rating, of course, but the reason scaling Grace is so good is because you are taking this Iron Reflexes node. This converts all evasion rating to armor. What this does is it makes it so that when you're scaling Grace, it sort of double dips, because you're scaling Grace, which gives you more evasion. That evasion gets converted to armor and then gets scaled by your Determination aura. So it sort of goes through the process twice, if you get what I mean. So scaling Grace is very powerful So you use those together, and then you use a bunch of flasks with Mage Blood, so Stibnites and Basalts give you more armor, more evasion. You can also use Jades on there, and those are really good. And that'll give you a lot of armor. Once you get a Mage Blood and you set this up with like really scuffed gear, you like instantly have 1.5 million armor, so that is pretty solid. So that is sort of damage, and then defensively, of course, Physmid is sort of solved by just having a billion armor. And then for Elements right now, pretty much just doing 90 auras. So 90 auras, we're using a Melting of the Flesh in order to get that. So -4 all max elemental resistances, and then elemental resistances are capped by your highest maximum elemental resistance. So you want to get one really high in order to cap them all. So if you get 1 to 90 through this jewel, then everything's 90. So the way we are getting one of our resistances to 90 is right now using a Purity. So I'm using Purity of Fire right now, and then I'm using a Ruby Flask. Other setups, especially setups you use early on, might include Purity of Ice. So it's an easy, cheap way of doing this is using Purity of Ice with Aegis Aurora. Aegis Aurora gives you +5 max cold res, and then Purity of Ice, once you get it to level 23, which you get from having a level 21 gem and then putting it in like something that gives it +2 gem levels. So either like the Helmet Slot here you can unveil, or you can get a probably cheaper Corruption on the Aegis Aurora, which gives you +2 gems, so +2 AoE gems or something like that, which will scale your Purifier. Scaling Purifier to level 23 hits a breakpoint where it gives you more max res, and then that gets scaled further by your Aurora effect, so generally pretty important to hit that breakpoint. So yeah, you can do that with either Purifier, which is what you want to do when you get one of these chests, which gives you overcapped fire resistance armor. This is pretty late though, you're not going to have this for a while if you're starting out, so don't worry about it. In that case, just use Pure Device with Aegis, and you might need like a rare jewel with +2 cold res or something like that, but that's fine as well. So that is how we're getting 90 auras. As for source of recovery, you can do multiple things. Once you get into high investment on this character, you have one of these chests with armor is increased by overcapped fire res. This obviously incentivizes you to cap a bunch of fire res, so you can see I have a bunch of fire res out here. When you have this set up, you can go and take this Fire Mastery right here, which gives you 1 life per second per 1% uncapped fire res. This on its own gives you a bunch of life regen with Zel's Oath, and then you can use stuff like the Mage Blood Flask Suffix to give you even more, and stuff like that. Otherwise, you can do Ghost Reaver for Leech, or you can do, like now I'm taking Storm Drinker, just to have some Leech from my Smite. Otherwise, early on, I would recommend going Aegis. Aegis is really good because of the recover energy shield equal to 2% of your armor when you block line. You can imagine that 2% of 2 million armor is quite a lot of ES. Basically, it just refills your ES fully whenever you block. So you do want to get somewhere close to block cap with this. The way I'm doing that right now is you just do a Thread of Hope, and then you grab the Glancing Blow somehow. So you grab this, and then you grab Versatile Combatant. So these together give you a lot of block chance. So once you have those, you just need a little bit of block in order to get to the full 65-65. I'm getting it from this large cluster, which gives you a little bit, and then I just tattooed a bit in order to get the rest, in order to get fully capped. You can replace strength nodes with a +1 chance to block, so just have a few on here in order to get to the 65-65. And just to give credit where credit's due, Big Daddy on YouTube is one of the armor stacker grinders who like league starts armor stacker every league, I'm pretty sure, and just has put a lot of work into documenting different builds and setups, and a lot of the framework of this is very similar to some of the stuff he's been doing, because I just thought it was great. So yeah, not claiming any ownership here or anything. If you want to see more content like this, probably go check him out. It's got some good stuff. So that is what I'm doing there defensively. As for other stuff, obviously, with the champion ascendancy, you want to stack max Fortify, so that is pretty solid. Mainly, you want to just take these nodes right here. This gives you an initial 6, which, of course, with this node gives you, 18% more armor and evasion, which is very powerful, and then gives you a bunch of attack speed as well. So as for the other gear, nothing super interesting. It is a Mage Blood build. I would say to not play this setup until you have a Mage Blood. You don't need much more than just a Mage Blood this league, which is very cool. And I'll go over exactly how to set this up in a little bit here, but generally I would say don't bother switching to this until you have a Mage Blood. It's definitely sort of built around that. You can do it before. I've seen setups of this over the years, but they've never looked super comfy to me. I think it's probably just smoother to play some other, like a Slayer build or something like that, and then just swap over once you've formed up the belts, and I think you'll have a really, really easy time with that, because the second you swap over with the Mage Blood, you'll be very, very powerful. So it's like very cool. But yeah, one new cool addition to this league, as you can see, this amulet is new. So this is the Whispers of Infinity amulet. It's one of the new boss drops. You've probably seen this around. It's a big build enabling amulet for a lot of different archetypes, and it's very cool. So what this does is it has 2 components to it, sort of. It has the mana stacking components and then some ES stuff. We can sort of just ignore all the mana stuff, so that added chaos damage per max mana and the reduced max mana sort of just don't do anything for the character, because I mean, we are reserving all the mana anyway, and it's all sort of whatever. But the good part about this amulet is that, first of all, you get a ton of flat ES. You can see mine gives me 437 maximum energy shield right now, just flat. That is a lot of energy shield, so that's very good. But the best part about this amulet is the last line. Skills cost energy shield instead of mana or life. This maybe instantly doesn't pop as to why it's so good, but it is very good. So the reason why I think this is really good in the early to mid-level investment on War Berserkers is because it lets you put Grace into your Martial Legion boots. So Martial Legion, if you're not familiar, you can put an aura in here. It gets supported by level 25 Divine Blessing. It basically turns an aura into a temporary buff. So you cast your temporary aura and that gives you a buff. This basically just gives you the aura for 16 seconds right now with my current setup. And yeah, then you have the aura. So you just need to recast it every few seconds. Generally, the way this is balanced out is that it gives it a very high mana cost. So you can see if I remove this amulet, this thing costs 1100 mana. And you can see my max mana is only 1000. So I wouldn't even be able to cast this even if I had nothing reserved. So this used to be fixable before they removed a bunch of the reduced mana cost craft. So you could have reduced mana cost on your flasks and you can have it on jewels and stuff like that. These are now gone from the game. So it's very hard to actually get Grace into Mortal Legions anymore. Usually what people do is just reserve it as a normal aura. But of course that takes up, first of all, you have to reserve it, so it takes up the reservation, and it takes up a gem sock, so it has a lot of opportunity cost, whereas if you put it in the boots, assuming you can cast it, you basically get it for free, as you don't need to reserve it, and also you get more gem levels, so it gives you more damage. Scaling Grace gem levels is very powerful for the build, because it gives you more evasion, and that is a big source of damage. So it is very nice being able to put Grace in here, and the reason we can that is because of the amulet that makes the skill costs energy shield. So now this thing costs energy shield instead of life, and we have a lot of that compared to not very much mana. And this has a bunch of other cool interactions as well. One thing to note with this is I believe what happens when it converts mana cost, the mana multipliers from support gems don't apply anymore. So it makes everything sort of really, really cheap, as you might have noticed here. When I take the amulet off, right, this thing costs 1100 mana. When I put it on, this thing only costs 278 energy shield, which is like nothing. So it, with that in mind, I think basically what this reads for the build is all skills are free, which is pretty cool, because I mean, I can just spam Grace here and you can see my ES doesn't even go down because I have some regen, right? Like it is very powerful. So everything just becomes free. You can reserve all your mana, which you can see I'm doing right now. If we enable our auras, I have 6 unreserved and everything is castable and really good. So it gives both the damage from the gem levels on Grace, and also just makes everything very smooth because everything is just free. You don't need to bother with the mana cost, and that is very neat. So it's a very, very powerful amulet. I think eventually this might get outscaled, because on Giga high investment, I believe you probably want to swap these out for some synth boots. And at that point, obviously, you don't get the damage boost anymore from this because you are no longer Divine Blessinging the Grace gem. So you don't really need this anymore at that point. But that is more like you need synth boots and really good ones. So it's pretty late. So I think this will be really good for a really long time. Otherwise, you could use Eternal Struggle, which is like the classic one I see people using. That can give you aura effect and like cull, which is very nice. But it's like maybe, I think that is like a little bit more damage maybe than this if you get a really well-rolled one, but a really well-rolled one of those is very expensive, and this is extremely common and you can get really good corruptions on it for pretty cheap, and yeah, it's just very cool. So big recommend. I've been a big fan of this amulet. Eventually it'll get upscaled, but I'm sure I'm going to use it for a very long time. So that is a very cool addition that is new to this league, to this build. Other cool new things, I'm using the new One of the Prophet Flask because it's sort of fun. Because I'm reserving basically all my mana, tinctures don't really work right now for this setup, because the mana burn, I mean, it instantly just goes to 0 mana and then it turns off. So tinctures aren't really viable right now. If I were to get a bit more unreserved, I can use a tincture instead. Tinctures are very powerful, and you get big burst windows. But for now, I'm using this One of the Prophet Flask. You don't need this, but it's very fun. It just gives you a bunch of wacky buffs when you're mapping, and they're all pretty powerful, and they're all like noticeable, which is cool. Otherwise, of course, I am using the Fortified Gloves. These work really well with champions. These are pretty expensive though, and if you don't have these, when you start out, you can just use the Soul Ascension Gloves, which give you Soul Eater stacks when you hit rares. They are quite good, especially when you don't have too much damage, so you have quite a high uptime on like bosses and stuff. Which lets you max out your stacks, and then they become very powerful. So those are pretty good, and then you can just use those until you have enough to afford these. On Champion, these are very, very powerful because obviously Max Fort scales crazily on Champion with the new Ascendancy, so getting plus 10 like that is really good, and getting even more attack speed scaling per them is also very nice. So they're quite good. Yeah, and otherwise it's just rare gear. Using the old cash chests, I have a really good ring, but you don't need this. And then just a random helmet with some stats on it. Yeah. Pretty much like that. As for the tree, I'm using a bunch of, it's kind of scuffed actually. I've not upgraded. This is something that I'm going to upgrade pretty soon, but you can see all my jewels are pretty bad. Like these are just random large passives, and then all my introspection jewels are pretty awful. I rolled them myself and just randomly exalted stuff on them. None of them have increased effect, and I'm only using 2 clusters. Eventually it's going to use 3, but it's just a little bit early for that. So the tree, like this tree is pretty basic, but right now I'm going on the left side. I think eventually you might want to go right side with this character, but I'm going to have to POB that stuff and look at that. But so that is pretty neat. Just have a random brutal strength here with one aura effect. You can get 2 aura effect on these 2 nodes, but those are spiked a little bit. So here's just one with 1. Pretty much what I've been doing. It's been working really well, following a lot of content super well. It's super juiced right now, and it's only going to scale from here. So I've been really enjoying it. But one thing I want to make sure I mention in this video is that it's actually really the barrier of entry for Armour Stack in this league is actually quite low. To my surprise, I would say you do want a Mage Blood, so there is that. So it's not a cheap build by any means. But you do, once you do have the Mage Blood, you don't really need a lot else. You basically just need a Mage Blood and maybe like, I don't know, 30-40 div for like the rest of the random gear pieces and gems and stuff like that. I'm actually going to show you right here in POB what I mean. Alright, so here is the POB setup of a really just swapped to Armour Stacker from like a random other duelist build setup. So basically it has the Mage Blood, so as I said, you don't really want to swap. I mean, you can swap over pre-Mage Blood, but I just wouldn't. I think you'll have a really easy time if you just farm up the Mage Blood and then swap over. So it has Mage Blood, yes, but everything else is like very cheap. It just has random rare rings, like this one people on my stream called an Act 3 ring, which I was wearing, but you know, it worked fine for it. And basically you just want rings that fix your resist and fix whatever stats you need. So just random rare rings, all the same uniques here, except for Soul Ascensions instead of the Fortified Gloves. And these are like very cheap right now. I think they're like sub 1 div, so these are not that big of a deal at all. The single Corruption Martial Legion, I think also is very cheap. So you just get a +2. You can get either +2 aura, +2 duration, or +2 AoE gems. All these work and are very good. Random rare helmet, you don't actually need +2 levels on this. You can just get +2 corrupted on the Aegis, and then put your purity in there if you so need to. Yeah, and as for the clusters, it's the same clusters I was using. They're all pretty basic. You can see it's just random Snowstorm here, random bad Introspection Jewels, and yeah, stuff like that. And still you're sitting at like really high EHP. I think this is with Molten Shell though, but you can see like really good EHP numbers and you know, solid like 50 mil DPS just like this, with like really cope gear. So like the second you get a Mage Blood, pretty much you'll have like a good character already. Obviously this isn't like the most impressive numbers in the world, but I think for being an Armour Stacker, which is notoriously generally a high barrier to entry, just needing a Mage Blood, these are like good numbers, and it's like it's smooth enough to where you can farm pretty much all content reasonably well. At least like I was doing a lot of tier 70 farming with this and feeling really good. So I don't know, I had a really good time swapping over to this, so I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that, you know, as the barrier of entry here is the Mage Blood, and that's it. It's not like you don't need like Mage Blood plus 200 div or whatever, which I know is sometimes the case with the builds on this channel, but this one you really only need the belt, and then you're sort of good to go. So that's pretty cool, and I'm sure this applies to Scion as well. This is not champion only. I'm sure you can also get really good starts with the Scion, so that is very cool. So if you're curious about the current setup of the character, like updated, this is what I'm currently using. So this is sitting at around 180 mil-ish with double hitting no smite, and then pretty good EHP numbers. I think this is kind of cheaty because I have this thing on, because it just defaults that on. There you go. So you can see, so double the HP numbers of the previous character pretty much, and then yeah, more than double the damage as well. So it has been scaling, sitting at almost 2.5 mil armor here, and it's not very, I don't think there's much cheating involved here really in the PoE. So it's pretty solid, and it's only going to get better from here. I have some big switch ups in mind for this. As I said, I might path over the other side. We'll see what we do, but I think that's probably good. But I'll just need to set it up on POB and check it out. But yeah, I think it's been going very well. I've really been enjoying it, and yeah, it's been very cool. So this is the setup, by the way, with the overcap chest that I crafted yesterday on stream. This has all the expensive stuff, so this is like fair bit invested for sure. But yeah, you know, it's the way with these characters. And this is still using Aegis, by the way. I just really like the recovery layer of Aegis, and I haven't felt the need to go double Dream Feather yet, but I might in the future, given I found a good setup for it. I mean, you can see right now, if you just put another one on, you get up to like 360 mil, like just like that. And this is with Smite, which is not the best damage skill for this setup. Since this is all like generic attack scaling, you can kind of use any skill. So like you can use, I mean, people use Lightning Strike and stuff like that. I think Molten Strike is probably the highest damage skill you can use, just because of the way it interacts with the projectiles. So if you want to really juice your damage, that's probably the way to go. But as for the Merc setup, so we have our Merc here. I'm currently using the Wonder. There's two I've been using. I've been using the Wonder, or I've been using the War Priest. Different perks with different ones. The Wonder, what I wanted to try on the Wonder was this shield someone told me about. So this gives 5% chance for the Merc to grant an endurance charge to nearby allies on hit. This sounded really good, especially with the Wander Merc, who has like KB, which just hits a bunch of times. So I figured this might be a really good way of just getting endurance charge uptime. I have not found this to be reliable enough to really actually use, unfortunately. She just doesn't really hit enough to make, like, for mapping it is reliable and is good, but for low target amounts, I found that it's just not really what you want. So I have had to rely on my good old inexorable still. So I was hoping I could just unspec these with the Merc like this, but I don't think I want to do that just yet. But otherwise, the core things for the Merc are Duran's Prototype and Perkle's Toe. This gives you lucky damage, which is really good with lightning skills, because lightning skills have a really big roll range. So having lucky damage, which rolls your damage twice and picks the higher number, this gets very powerful once you have big damage ranges. So lightning damage skills like Smite have really big damage ranges. So lucky damage is like 20-30% more damage, something like that. So very powerful. And then obviously Duran's Prototype sets the enemy lightning resistance to the lightning resistance of the Merc, and the Merc has minus 200. So yeah, this gives you a lot of damage, and the Mercs don't really die, so it's almost free. it's really good. As for the gear, just rings for minus lightning res. This thing gives you minus lightning res, and then also gives you some life regen, which is quite nice on the guy. And then I just have random rares with like life and resists, mainly just resists. Got some life regen rate on this helmet, which I think is pretty good. This one, I mean, the Merc, I guess, maims on hit and intimidates on hit, which is, you know, pretty neat. And then some random boots. Sap ground is like something. One thing you can do, which was what I was doing with the War Priest. So I only recently swapped over to Purity of Elements. So once you get the overcap chest, you can swap over to Purity of Elements, because it sort of turns Purity of Elements into a damage aura, since you get a bunch of resist from it, and resist becomes damage when you have the chest. But before that, you don't really want to run this. It doesn't really do much. So you need to fix your ailments immunity somehow. The way I was doing it, and you can use like Storm Shroud for this for a more reliable way of doing this, but the way I was doing it was I was using the War Priest with the Sign of the Sin Eater scepter, which is a really cool item. Enemies inflict elemental ailments on you instead of your nearby allies. So basically the Merc takes all the ailments that would be inflicted on me once they have this on. And you use that alongside a boot with these crafts. So this 100% chance to avoid being chilled, and then 100% chance to avoid being frozen on the Merc. Because if you don't have these, then the Merc's just going to get perma-frozen, and then he's just going to fall behind and not do anything. So you want these on the boots, but once you do have them on the boots, it actually works really well. Mercs are very tanky, so they don't really die, and yeah, you get sort of a really good way of getting ailment immune that way. The problem is, like, it doesn't apply to ground effects. So if you're doing like blue altars, those add shield ground and shot ground for 50%, kind of all over the place. So those are still going to get you, which is a little bit annoying, which is why having something like a Purity of Elements is really nice, because this is just blanket ailment immunity. But until then, I think this actually worked really well, and I might actually switch back to this guy eventually anyway. As for the auras you can get from them, it is nice getting haste from the Wanderer, especially if you can't fit in haste naturally on your character. But you do generally just want to cast haste yourself, because all your auras are better than the Merc's auras, because you just scale them harder. But yeah, I think the best aura is probably going to be haste from the Wanderer. The War Priest gets Pure Lightning, which is not very good, because that gives him lightning res, which you don't want to get, because you want them to have negative 200 for the giga damage. So that is what I've been doing with the Merc, just generic Perkle's Toe, do all this stuff. It's pretty standard, I think, for almost any lightning damage build this league, right? It's just extremely powerful. So yeah, I think that is a little bit of an overview of the character that I'm playing so far. It's, again, very early. I have some plans of fun stuff to try out, and big switches and things to do with it. But yeah, I've been having a really good time with it. I think it's a really solid choice this league. Certainly, it's in a good state, and you don't really need much to swap over to it in comparison to other leagues, so it's actually pretty cool. You can do armor stacking fairly early on, which is quite fun, because it's a very fun archetype. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that video. Hopefully it wasn't too rambly. I tried to cover most things that came to mind, but you know, it is what it is. All the POBs are going to be in the description. I'll add the early, like, just swapped over POB, which is the cheaper version, which is basically Mage Blood plus like 20-30 do. I'll put that in the description, and then I'll put the current one, which is this one, which has some unethical stuff like this rig, which is going to get a crafting video in a few days here, and then yeah, a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, those will be in the description for you to watch. I think will be quite good. So yeah, a lot more stuff in the future. Sorry for the delay again. I have been streaming over on Twitch. I'll put that link in the description as well if you want to stop by. So there have been streams, but videos have been a little bit delayed, but I'll get back into the swing of things. Don't worry. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll be back in the next one.